tapas, sushi, fortune cookies, ramen noodles. Whenever we think of these things and associate them with a country. So when I lived in Asia, I enjoyed sticky rice and sugarcane drinks. But what about Britain? What do people think of in relation to food and drinks when they think of Britain? Hello and welcome to another English podcast with Paul. I'm your host Paul, and today again we're in our mobile acoustic setup. Alright, so today we're talking about tea. Now, interestingly, there are a few different factors that we'll come across in respect to tea and the different meanings. But let's just go back a little bit. Let's just do a little bit of a history lesson. And so it's been said, all right, true or not true, I don't know, but it's been said that Britain was the epicenter for the Industrial Revolution. Now, you can argue that point one way or the other, whether it was France, England, or wherever else or whatever, somewhere in Europe, I don't know. But it was also stated then, from that, came the working day. And they estimated that between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. because of throughout the year, I think like 7 o'clock in the morning was in the earliest light. And so by 8 o'clock, you should be sort of up and dressed, ready for work. And by 5, 6 o'clock, it would be dark, throughout the winter. So I think they come up with the idea of between 8 and 5 being the working day. And I assume that's mostly like for the workhouses and things like that. But if I'm wrong, please do correct me. Right. So then on from there, it was said, true or not true, that the tea break came because when in the war and women took over the men's roles, the women were not able to keep that pace that the men were keeping of I don't know the time and speed and energy needed for productivity, for example. And so apparently, this is what I've read, apparently that's where the tea break come in the morning and the afternoon. So we call it 11sies. So like between 10 and 11 o'clock, you might have 15 minutes for a break, for a drink, for a snack or whatever. And the same again in the afternoon for around 3 o'clock-ish. That's kind of customary. Even in offices today, people will kind of stop around that time to grab a quick drink. So that's where it's said to have come from. It's now really, really heavy in our culture, this whole idea of stopping for tea. Now, it's also to the point where it's joked about in TV shows, in reality shows, and even in films. You might see something like, I don't know, a TV show, what was it, Downton Abbey, something like that, back in the Victorian era. And you'll see that there will be maybe a stressful situation. Something has happened. Oh no, drama. And then somebody, no doubt, will say, oh, let's put the kettle on. Let's have a brew. Let's sit down and have a cup of tea. And I think that was what the British latched on to as a way of calming things down, taking a moment, taking a break, and just being able to get perspective of the situation. And not to act drastically. But like I say, that's part of the culture now. Whenever something drama happens, there's always talk of putting the kettle on, having a brew, having a cup of tea, having a break. All right, what else can I say? So then there's several different words from this and phrases and thoughts. All right, so my microphone is right in the way of my notes at the moment, so apologies. Right then, so we got the kettle on? Have you got the kettle on? And often it would be a sign of maybe two friends coming together, and often there was a point, especially in visitors coming over, whether they're neighbours and they've just popped over because they want to chat and gossip about what's going on, or whether it's higher class people that want to meet up for social engagement and talk about high society, which I'll get onto in a moment. So you might often knock on the door and get invited in and say, "Oh, come on and put the kettle on and I'll tell you what my big news is. I'll tell you what's happening." And so that's a way of giving yourself a reason, an excuse to sit down and talk. And then we'll get into biscuits and cake in a moment. Right, so let's have a brew. Let's have a cuppa. Tea for two? You might say that if you go into a cafe. Can I have tea for two? Tea for two? And hold two fingers up. Tea for two? That would normally be a pot of tea big enough for 2 cups of tea, or for 2 people to have more than 1 cup of tea. All right. Got a cuppa? You got your cup? Come on in. You got your cup? Let's go make a cup of tea. Dunkin' biscuits. Oh, don't get me started on biscuits. What's really a biscuit? What's not a biscuit? And the whole drama of Jaffa cakes. What's a Jaffa cake, I hear you say? Well, some people believe a Jaffa cake is more like a biscuit and can dunk it in tea. I know, right? You can't dunk a Jaffa cake in tea. That's just not on. That's just... A Jaffa cake is a cake. And you can have that on the side. Although it's small and comes in a packet, like a biscuit, it's not a biscuit. It's a cake. All right, but let's not get carried away. All right, then. Tea and cake often go well together. So often, if you meet your friend in town, let's say she's been Christmas shopping and you've been Christmas shopping, or you're meeting up with a friend or a work colleague, maybe on a Saturday afternoon, something like that. You know, you're a little bit tired, you've been shopping, and now you want to have a bit of a chat and a sit down. So really, it's just a break, so you can give your feet a rest. So you sit down, order a cup of tea, and often you'd order a cake, because that's a little bit more extravagant than a biscuit. And often in the UK, if you go into a tea shop, is often the case that there's either no biscuits and that you don't bring your own, or biscuits you don't like. But they do offer, almost every single coffee shop and tea shop offer cake. That's because you can sell it for more money. If you used to have a couple of biscuits, maybe at home or when somebody comes round, you might just spend a few pound on biscuits a week, maybe like £4 or £5 on biscuits a week for entertaining, to keep your builder happy, to keep your I can't say your staff happy, but to keep people that give you a service, keep them happy. Oh, here's a cup of tea, here's a couple of biscuits. Oh, we got chocolate biscuits for you because you're special. Chocolate biscuits. The plumber's going to do a nice job and he's going to look after us. All right. So often when you're out, though, in town and you're having a rest, maybe you're there with your mother or your grandma, you'd have a piece of cake. Just a little bit sweet something that balances out well with a nice couple of cups of tea, and you can have a rest. One might say, oh, wet my whistle. I've been gasping, parched, I am parched, like a desert in my throat, I tell you. Oh, slow service here, isn't it? Slow service. I've been at your house for 10 minutes and you haven't offered to make a cup of tea. Despicable. Often, again, that's very passive-aggressive teasing. So we often feel like we have to ask or wait for somebody to offer us a beverage when we go to somebody else's place. Often this also happens in high-end establishments. You may be, I don't know, for example, ordering a wedding dress, trying on wedding dresses, and there'll often be wine or some other beverage to keep you hydrated and happy and alert and enjoying the time of shopping for an expensive dress. Not so much in the lower classes, but that's what I hear about for the upper classes. All right, so I'm joking aside here, talking about classes and class systems, but often you can hear a lot about somebody's class background by the way they talk, especially around food and beverages. So, for example, a poor person like myself might say, I have 3 squares a day, 3 square meals. So even if you're in the workhouse or if you're in prison, you would have 3 square meals a day. So breakfast, lunch, and tea. 3 meals a day, that would be a lot. And some people even say that the homeless prefer to go to prison and do something terrible to go to prison, especially, and I've worked in a prison, and especially around Christmas time. You'll hear of homeless people trying to steal expensive bottles of alcohol. So the law will have to prosecute and they would have to go to prison, so they'll get a nice warm bed and food for a few weeks. And what kind of country does that? You need a nice warm bed, so you have to commit a crime so you get a nice warm bed and some food. It's terrible. Ugh, all right, let's get off of that one. So 3 square meals a day, and often you'd hear poor people like myself talk about breakfast, and then we'd talk about lunch, and then we would talk about tea time. That's kind of it for poor people: breakfast, lunch, and tea. But if you're in the upper classes, or you watch Downton Abbey and things like that, you'd see breakfast. You would see, actually, the poor people call lunch dinner. I know, right? So in school, you'd have a dinner lady at like noon, lunchtime, 1, 2 o'clock. So it'd be a dinner lady that would help the children line up and get their dinner. So you'd have your dinner break at 12, 1 o'clock. So poor people like myself say breakfast, dinner, and then tea. So it's the same word as in a cup of tea as your tea that you eat as your evening meal. All right, so three main meal times: breakfast, dinner, and tea. And a dinner break, dinner lady, things like that. Whereas if you're from more an affluent background, or you're watching Downton Abbey, there would be breakfast. Then there would be lunch. Then you might have high tea, which is kind of like late afternoons, or maybe 3 o'clock, where you would have a drink of tea and some cake. And then I don't know if you've ever seen them, but we used to have like a serving plate with 3 tiers on it, and you'd have like bigger cakes on the bottom and biscuits on the top, and that would have a little handle on it. So if you go into a sweet little tea shop in the UK, you may get afternoon tea. There may be sandwiches, or there may be cakes, and it'll come on a little like 3 plates, 3 different side plates, all together, like hanging on one, I don't know, spindle with a little handle on top. Very eloquent and quaint, and some nice cups to use, probably porcelain or china, something delicate and pretty. You'll see people taking photos of it. So high tea is often sandwiches or cake and biscuits, and that's normally around 3 o'clock. And then they would have dinner. Dinner is served. It's 7 p.m. dinner time. So posh people would have dinner much later in the evening. And then if one missed dinner, or if one was still famished, still hungry, oh, I'm famished, I could eat some supper. And supper is the posh word for snacks later in the evening. Generally not too big or not cooked, maybe just some toast, something like that, or sandwiches, or I don't know what other posh people eat for supper. I'm not so sure. So yeah, it's very interesting that the classifications between the classes between the wealthy and those that are less affluent. So yeah, you can see a cross division of how people talk about the meal times. So, does this happen in your culture? Does it happen in your country? Let me know in the comments below. Do you have different words for wealthy people and different words for poor people describing food times? And does it stop only at food? Or is there more extravagant words for those that are more eloquent, that may also be more financially affluent? Interesting. All right, okay. If you've got any other interesting words for a cup of tea or a coffee or beverages, let me know in the comments below. I'd be interested to find out. I think it's fun. All right, that's it for this week. See you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.